Ladies and gentlemen, hello once again. It's a great honor for me to moderate this session. And I would also like, first of all, to thank you all for your kind attention until now and enriching discussions that we have been able to conduct until this precise moment. So this third session is entitled Historic Preservation, Conservation, and Appropriation. And in this session, 8 people are going to intervene. So 8 speakers. Yes, 8 speakers. So there are many speakers online, and I think there's only one person. So the 7 other people will be intervening online. So I think that's also a small challenge for me. But anyway, I think with your help, we will be able to manage. So first of all, I would like now to introduce the first speakers from the first speakers. So that is one Ruoran and Robin, who are going to give us a lecture on the international settlement of Tientsin and the German concession that is between 1894 and 1970, from history to heritage. As a brief presentation of our first speakers, Ruoran Wang is postdoctoral fellow at the School of Architecture, Tianjin University, currently a postdoctoral fellow at the International Research Center for Chinese Cultural Heritage Conservation, School of Architecture, Tianjin University. And Subin is chair professor of the School of Architecture of Tianjin University and executive deputy director of the International Research Center for Chinese Cultural Heritage Conservation. So please, you have the floor.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your introduction. Thank you very much. My name is Ruoran Wang from the International Research Center for Chinese Cultural Heritage Conservation, Tianjin University of China. And thank you very much for the invitation from ICOMOS Germany and Professor FOSSI. It is my great honor to present our team's research. And my report is the international settlement of Tianjin and the German concession, from history to heritage. My presentation is from five parts, which are the open port of Tianjin, the planning, construction, and heritization process of the German concession, and the conclusion. First, the open port of Tianjin and the international settlement. After Tianjin opened as a treaty port in 1860, Britain, France, the US zoned concessions along the High River. After that, Germany, Japan, Russia, Italy, the Austro-Hungarian empires, and Belgium demarcated concessions from 1895 to 1900. The concession was an overseas enclave in which foreign powers had administrative rights, and the treaties were formed to establish the right of residence of foreigners in a specific area of a city. The imperial country dispatched consular officials to manage the concessions, and the municipal council with subordinate department carried out urban construction, foreign trade, missionary, and other activities, while local authorities governed the rest of the city. Considering this background, Tianjin was the only city in modern China that had opened up to 9 foreign concessions. The city was unique with its complex multicultural exchanges and influences. The total area of the 9 countries' concession was equal to nearly 10 times that of the old city of Tianjin. The concession was a country within a country, and the planning and construction of the concession are each governed by its own system, but not connected each other. The contract of the German concession was signed in 1895, beside the American concession along the High River. The first expansion took place in 1901 and then in 1902 due to the Americans giving up their concession through the diplomatic mediation of Britain, the US, and Germany. A part of it became the German and another part became the British. The area was expanded for the second time. In the terms of the basic timeline, the German concession exists from 1895 to 1917 due to the World War I. Since China and Germany returned to diplomatic relations in 1921, the Germans went back to Tianjin until 1943, when Chinese government reclaimed all the concessions. It came to the heritization process in 1986, when Tianjin was listed in the National Historical and Cultural City. In 2019, the former German concession area was included in one of the 14 urban historical areas, and the German style area has been considered and planned until today. The second part is the planning of the German concessions with the William Street as a central axis. At the beginning, the German consulate in Tianjin was under direct management. As the number of Germans gradually increased, the concession's administrative organization was established, which are the board of directors and the municipal council. The board took over the administrative, financial, engineering, and sanitary matters, with the German Consul General in Tianjin as the chairman. The land ownership and all the construction were handled by the Deutsche Asia Bank. The Deutsche Asia Bank was founded in Shanghai in 1889 by 13 large German banks jointly invested in the composition of German overseas banking system. It is a central agency for German capital activities in modern China. With the completion of the Industrial Revolution, the Deutsche Bank began to turn its attention to overseas market, particularly the Far East, to expand and facilitate German commercial contacts with overseas market, and in particular to free German overseas trade from British intermediation. In German concession, during the first 5 years, the planning was dominated by military deployment, which included the commanding officers' headquarters, barracks, military hospitals. At the beginning of the 20th century, the planning shifted toward political and diplomatic displays. As the British and the French concessions had begun to develop rapidly at that time, the German concession also began systematic planning, as seen from the plan of 1899 on the right. It had been divided into plots and leased out. So we can see the German consulate, municipal council, command, and the memorial statue with the square set along the William Street, the first modern road and the central axis. And here are some pictures of the William Street. So the third part is the construction of German concession with the statue square as the center. When the contract was first signed, as in the early days of the British and the French concessions, the Germans also chose to borrow the houses of local gentry. And it was not until 1907 that the German consulate was built, located on William Street next to the Ruoran statue and the square. The Ruoran statue is situated in the center of the square, facing the German consulate, with the German church, which was founded in 1901 after the Boxer Rebellion, on the right-hand side. So maybe most of you know that Ruoran was a national hero in the battle in 778, a symbolic struggle between Christianity and paganism. His story was recorded, written, and became famous. It is said that the God left two swords on earth. One is the spiritual power, which belongs to the Pope. The other is the secular power, which belongs to the Emperor and the Ruoran. In the Middle Age, Ruoran moved into German hero with chivalry. his statues were erected in northern Germany. The famous one is Bremen's Town Hall, as the outstanding representations of civic autonomy and sovereignty. In Tianjin, Ruoran's statue faced the German consulate as a sign of autonomy and market rights, and a reminder of secular power. At the same time, the German Protestant church was set beside the statue, which also reminded a spiritual power. With this important landmark, this square and the statue were deeply symbolic as the centerpiece of the construction of German concession. On the one hand, it was a symbol of secular power. On the other hand, it represented the spiritual identity, German chivalry in the overseas enclave. In addition, after the 1910s, road and municipal facilities were gradually completed, and the street lamp were erected, from which a clock was hung and written in Chinese, which means keep time, cherish time, introducing the modern idea of standardized times and regulations into everyday life. And also some other important buildings such as the Municipal Council and the German Club, built in 1907. It was a center of social activities. In addition, the German Chinese school, it was established to meet the need of the German children and gradually opened to the Chinese. It introduced Western school management ideas and many teaching tools, equipment, and biological specimens from Germany. The first part is the transformation and heritage. William Street as the central axis of the German concession from 1895 to 1917. When the German concession was recovered by China after the World War I, the name of the road was changed to Thomas Woodrow Wilson, the American president. After the establishment of People's Republic of China in 1949, the road's name was changed to Jiefang Road, which means liberation, which shows the cultural and identity changed behind it. After the concession was reclaimed, many of the original buildings and their functions changed. The consulate and the club were used by the U.S. Navy and then became the Armed Police Corps and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. Of the 14 historic cultural districts in Tianjin, most of the original German concessions were located in the Jiefang South Road Historical Conservation District. This area is mainly commercial, with only few buildings remaining from the concession period, such as the former club. The club has been renovated several times to become the historical and stylistic architecture of Tianjin with very important level. In the beginning of 21st century, due to the tourism development, the historic conservation district has become German-style area. With very few buildings remaining, it has begun to build new buildings that mimic classical architecture, which did not exist in the original concession. This is the planned center of the German-style area, a small-town hotel modeled on the German style. The last is the conclusion. This paper discovered the worldwide archives to clarify the history and the construction of German concession in Tianjin and to review the planning, functional transformation, and heritage of the space. It concludes that, firstly, in terms of the planning drivers, it could be divided into different phases of development, from an early focus on military, and then focus on political and diplomatic displays, to a late focus on commercial operations. Secondly, the foreign companies represented by the Deutsche Asia Bank played the role of imperial intermediaries. They were similar to Jardine Matheson in the British concession and also the CFEO in the French concession, financed and operated land on behalf of the government. Thirdly, in terms of the architecture, it represented the imperial competition and games. The concession became an experimental ground for the empire to compete for display abroad, and they were breaking the trade monopoly other countries in China. Firstly, the concession has brought modernity to the traditional Chinese city. It introduced the modern architecture style, material and construction technique, as well as the concept of time, regulations of urban management, modern education, etc. Fifthly, regarding the transformation after 1949, due to the better quality of the architectural remains and the location advantage, many buildings became government institutions, such as Armed Police Headquarters and the Public Security Bureau, carried out a transformation of architectural function and the collective identity. Lastly is the heritage process until today. The area began to re-evaluate its historical value. Around 2000, new buildings imitating the German architecture appeared. Nowadays, people are beginning to reflect on whether imitations are meaningful and how Tianjin's unique modern history and regional identity could be expressed through the cityscape. So that's all for my report. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. Before I introduce the next lecture, I would like to maybe apologize for the fact that I lose sight of the third speaker in this first lecture. That is Professor Aoki Nebu, who is Professor at School of Architecture at Tianjin University, China also. So our second lecture is entitled German Fortresses in Northern Cameroon, Preserving Physical Remains and Memories of an Ultimate Resistance Against the Allies until 1916. So the lecture is from Professor Narcisse Santores Chande, who is PhD, holds a PhD in art history and is senior lecturer and deputy head of the Fine Arts and History of Art at the University of Yaoundé. His expertise lies in various inventory projects initiated around Cameroon's local and national cultural heritage. Chande is a member of the Society of Africanist Archaeologists and postdoctoral researcher at the National Institute for Art History in Paris, France. You have the floor, please.
Thank you. Many thanks to organizing committee for inviting me here, and thanks to ICOMOS.de. My communication concerns the German fortress in northern Cameroon, preserving physical remains and memories of an ultimate resistance against Allies until 1916. By the way of introduction, a presentation of the historical context and geostrategic conditions in which the fortresses were built. The historical context is that of the extension of the Great War in Cameroon under German protectorates against the French, English, and Belgian allies. Aware of the considerable numerical inferiority of its soldiers and the risk of a Blitz on the Atlantic coast and interland borders, the German army gradually abandoned its positions there and retreated towards the mountains, the mountainous area of the north and the undulating plateaus around the capital Yaoundé. From this strategic withdrawal, the stone fortresses that best resist to Allied assault were set up, especially in the north of the country. Note that the fortresses were built on granite mountains with a number of natural and cultural advantages. They are rocky chaos consisting natural ramparts and labyrinthine enclaves. They are reserves of water, fauna, and flora, enabling local food self-sufficiency. sufficiency. They are, at last, ancient refugees eradicated by any group during their resistance to the raid of Sudanese empires, to the jihad of the Pearl, and to the German colonization itself. Two mountain ranges are characteristic of this withdrawal strategy. The mountain, the Mora range, the Mora mountain range in the northern, the far north Cameroon. We can see it with a broken cycle line in the map, and the Banyo mountain ranges. We can see also the map of Cameroon during the war, during the German occupation. You will see that this mountain is in the area where we are about 1,200 over the sea. The Mora mountain range, it reached an altitude of 1,200 meters and has been inhabited since the 20th century by the Mora groups. At the head of the contingent of 300 soldiers, reservists, and porters, Captain Frank Haben organized his resistance around the Gadema, Moulongre, Moran Massif, and Dolo Massif, the longest and most strategic siege in Cameroon. It lasted for 18 months and ended 6 weeks after the rest of the country was conquered. You can see the picture of Mora mountain range. The Banyo mountain range is the second mountain that was strategic. It hides on to an altitude of almost 1,700 meters and was inhabited from the 50th century until the Fulani jihad by various groups, in particular the Wawa, the Konda, Vuti, and Magumbila. Now we present an inventory of fortresses and state of preservation or conservation. It should be noted that the two types of fortresses inventory can be distinguished overall by the presence or absence of cement mortar in the smaller rubble blocks. The small square mortar fortress at Banyo, they occupy a polygonal area of around 25,000 meters square in the summit of Mount Jumbal, concentrated towards the eastern ridge line where they have a panoramic view in the popular center of the plain. The complex includes essential infrastructure for sustainable and isolated survival on site, in particular for cover rock shelters. You can see it in the plan. I draw a granary in a pericenter position, a machine gun post, footer east, and the water source. The four shelters differ in terms of the number of openings, comfort, and capacity to accommodate between 15 and 30 people standing, sitting, or lying down. The shelter number one is the most spacious, stand out for its polygonal deep. We can see in the table, in the picture I see, we can see also that it is a fairly well-preserved structure, despite sporadic grumbling of the wall and the back of the room, and the tendency toward vandalism reflected in the graffiti of Icarus, name of the rocks adjacent to the entrance. Shelter 2 is characterized by its trapezoidal dips with bumpy walls. It has 2 parietal windows. It has 1 meter and 6 height door, and he steeply sloped sailing under a globular dome. We can also see its state of conservation in the picture. Shelter 3 is characterized by flooding dips, its bumpy wall, its originally modest entrance, and its lack of a window, please, with maintains the darkness, which maintains, please, the darkness as you go towards to the back on the room, and the growing reputation of a German prison, particularly attributed to the shelter. The shelter 4 laid out appear to have been a simple covered corridor designed in particular for ambushes and rapid retreats, as its narrow corridor has a double access door. This strategic passageway is covered by a huge slab in the shape of the loaf of grapes. There is tendency toward vandalism reflected in the graffiti of Hitler's name on the rock adjacent to the entrance. The granary is built on a rocky down and inspired by the most westerly local tradition model, which is reflected in its cylindrical or ovoid shape, its smooth vanish inner walls, and its overhead opening is in principle covered by a self-supporting T-shirt roof. The shooting range or the gun machine station, bear of a vast slab giving an excellent panoramic view on the town, occupying a surface area of around 8 meters square. This shooting range features a low arcade wall built in a voluminous stake of 120 centimeter height. The last essential element of the complex is the water feature. Is made up of an ellipse of colossal spherical monolith that hold back a small cascade of water from the mountain summit. The small square of mortarless fortress of Ruoran. Between this, I will after prevent that all the photos that I get here is from the French photographer Frédéric Gartner, that done it between 1916 and 1917. We get in this fortress the largest circular of elliptical communal huts or enclosures, distributed in 20s along the red line of the mountain peaks at the German headquarters at the Gagadema and his annex at Mulunray, inspired by the ash-all model of the individual Mora hut. They differ in size, being able to hold between 5 and 10 people. We get here a plan of this German headquarters. You have also the gradual relay ramparts that was built with the assistance of the mountainous people. Water spring in the form of well with stone-lined wall. The German, this part is more interesting because the German of Unnot Soldiers Cemetery is located at the top of the Dulu, contain around 10 graves, probably collective burials. These tombs were built in the pure tradition of circular tumulus mora. Methods of appropriation, preservation, and strategy for enhancing. The case of Banyo site, two contradictory forms of memorial appropriation. An uninhibited appropriation of the complicity of the Muslim Fulani Lamida. This is reflected in the involvement of Lamido Abubakar in the shores of the site and in the claim prospect of the site being included in the list in national cultural heritage inventories. A painful appropriation of the victimization of the mountainous ethnic group whose ancestors forced into the war before and forced to labor on the fortresses continue to perceive these seats as German prison. A popular appropriation of the seat that is reflected by regular visits, especially on weekends, by all kinds of people for sport, walk, fun, picnics, tourism, and school program. Heritage and tools development during our 2018 inventory on behalf of the Ministry of Art and Culture of Cameroon, you observe a rare awareness of these sites, heritage, and touristic potential among various stakeholders. Firstly, the Lamido of Banyo, we proposed that it be listed as the national heritage site. Secondly, the department delegation of the Ministry of Tourism and Leisure, in collaboration with the Lamida and the decentralization community of Banyo, have undertaken considerable work over the last 15 years to develop the site and public site. This is different form of work I've done to ameliorate the condition of conservation of this site. You can see a signboard, a restaurant, a mini water purification, a staircase, some with railing, and the steepest slope, and in the presence of a reception post. The Mora site, we get the same management like Banyo site. In conclusion, I should be note that by combining their picturesque orographic dimension with the history of the refugees of the mountain dwellers first, and then of the German second, the Mora and Jumbal site reveal exceptional heritage values from the point of view of ethno-archaeology, ethno-history, contemporary archaeology, ecological, aesthetic, and ecotourism. The estimation of riffle belts in the agrarian terraces, the inclusion of these belts in divinatory techniques, the appropriation of German rifles, helmets, and breastplates in the treasuries of certain lamibe, some lamibe, also attest to a form of heritage acculturation of German history. In addition, please define a genuine educational of touristic cry of the vestiges of the German period require not only taking into account the late mountain fortresses, but also the civil, administrative, military, penitentiary, commercially, hospital, religious, and art building, etc. Please, some example of this infrastructure that I speak about. Thank you.
So thank you for the two first speakers of this session for their insightful presentation. Now I'd like to move to the third presentation. I would like to move to the third presentation of this session, which is entitled From Construction Material Research to Renovation. the German architecture of Catholic churches in southern Tanzania. So the lecture would be presented by Nancy Ruoran and Valence Silayo. I think one of the persons is present and one of the speakers is online. Okay, so we have here Nancy, who I'm going to present. Briefly, she holds a PhD and she is lecturer in the Department of Archaeology and Heritage Studies, University of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. She also researches on memory, memorial, and memorialization of German colonialism in Tanzania. She is currently involved in the production of a documentary film about the Maji War to capture the transgenerational memories of the war and how these could be used in the history, teaching, and learning. Our second speaker is Valence Silayo, who holds a PhD and also a lecturer in the Department of Archaeology and Heritage Studies, also from the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. His research areas include the social complexities of the African states past and present. He has been involved in organizing dialogues about German colonialism and its impact on African states and questioning the removal of and restitution of human remains and cultural objects. So you have the floor, Nancy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the organizers of this conference and for the invitation to be here. I'll go straight to the presentation, and my presentation will focus on our presentation, rather. We'll focus on mission centers, its history, and it's particularly the Benedictine missionaries in southern part of Tanzania, the construction material and renovation material, as well as remembering and dismembering. So I'll speak about the missionary centers in southern Tanzania for the reason that it is one of the well-preserved, you may say, a heritage of the German colonialism in Tanzania. And I say it is well-preserved when you compare them with other administrative centers such as bombers, prisons, and the police services, which were all established during the same period. And these are well preserved because Christianity, or in this case Catholicism, is still very well practiced. And so at no point these monuments were abandoned and stopped to be used. And I come in with this because despite their existence in southern Tanzania, they are not part of the register of monuments of Tanzania. They are not included into the register, although they qualify, because Tanzanian law says after 100 years, a monument qualifies to be a part of the register of the country. And the result of this exclusion is that renovations, conservation are done under the missionaries in the way they see it fit. And in this time, these are no longer the German missionaries. These are the missionaries who inherited these sites and are putting them into use. So renovations that are going on are conducted by the locals. And so I say it was from Otto von Bismarck invitation in October 20, 1886, that the Benedictine were approached to establish missionary centers. And they were approached because before then, in 1850s, the French had already entered the region. And so Karl Peters also had his influence into having the Germans establishing missionary centers, especially to inflict the aspect of culture into the people of Tanzania. And so one can see this, that the establishment of the missionary was part of it, was a coercion that they were forced into establishing this mission. And into establishing the mission, they were given conditions. And some of these conditions include that there should be a division between the Catholics and the Protestant zones, that the mission should be established after the approval of the German East African Company, and that the German should be a medium of instructions, and also they must hoist the flag in front of the mission, and also they have to procure all the material from the German East African Company. And so the missionaries also should live free of charge. The German officials should live free of charge in the mission center. And you realize that these are some of the conditions that created a conflict between the local community and the missionaries. And in this case, you find that this region that I portray here as the study area is the same region that the Maji-Maji war resistance emanated from. And some of the reasons that caused the resistance were the conflicts between the missionaries and the people of southern Tanzania. So you realize that the choice of southern Tanzania by the Benedictine missionaries was not a coincidence. It was a mission that was planned, and this is especially the Protestants had already taken the northern part of Tanzania. And so they took the southern part of Tanzania and they established their mission center first in Pugu. And here is where they were affected by the Abushiri resistance that previous speakers spoke about. And then later they went to Dar es Salaam, and then Peramiho, and then in Lukuledi, Nyangao, and eventually Ndanda. Now, I portray this as the Benedictine Abbey in Ndanda, and you can see until today that there is a bearing of a flag in front of this monument. So the structure and the layout of the mission center initially were typically local. So as they entered the region, they established their mission centers based on the local material and available material to them. And you will see that the architecture of these buildings are not different from the local African architecture that they found within the region. You will see even the interior of the churches, such as the one of Lukuledi, that the interior also had aspects of a local material, although the design and portrayal can be said that it was an incomer and a new person. The construction technology and the constructor as well, you will see that there is no any missionary or architect that you can see in the building of a mission center and the church, for this case in Peramiho. You see that these are the local material that they procured locally, and actually the local people are here involved in construction of the first chapel. You realize that even eventually, then I should say here that the abandonment of the local technology followed the attack that was received during the resistances, and the use of local materials such as thatched roofs made it easier for them to be burned during the resistance. You find that the most casualties and difficulty that they faced during the Maji-Maji resistance was that the missionary centers were burned. And this goes also to the administrative centers. They were also burned because of the nature of the material that they used. And so they accepted that the new building and new construction will use different form of material. And you see that here they are using bricks. Now these are also procured locally because these are lateritic bricks that are made out of soil that was available in southern Tanzania. And you'll see that the plastering is of limestone, which was also procured locally from the Indian Ocean. And you find here also still the constructors of these monuments are typically Africans going on. At this scene, for example, you don't see any architect in terms of the German architect in it, although we believe that the architectural structures and the building itself was engineered by the Germans, but the builders, in fact, were Tanzanians. Now, this is when you say that there is a movement from the European architecture from the African architecture to the European architecture. And by 1940s, all the mission centers adopted the system of using the European form of architecture. And here you find this erected building, all of them built in the European model and running away completely from the African model of architecture. How do the people remember all this? How are these construction of the monuments remembered? These constructions are remembered as work that was done through slave labor. They are remembered as elements, as sites of penitential services and forced labor, as they remember the colonial administration. The remembering of these sites is attested to the fact that they never, in their environment, constructed anything of similar kind as what was done in the missionary. So although we mentioned that the labor that was produced to the missionaries, the service that was produced, the builders of the monuments were Africans, but you don't see this technology shifting from the church to the local community. So you see that the building of this architecture was supporting 100% a foreign architecture rather than infusing the same architecture into their own lives. And you see that these differences between the local architecture and the foreign can vividly be seen here in a mission center in Lindi, whereby just adjacent to the mission center, this is what it looks like. There is a church that was constructed by bricks, but immediately after it, there is a wooden, adobe and wattle house that is surrounding the mission. You see that despite being very close to the mission, there is no effort or desire to adopt similar architecture. Now, when it comes to renovation of these churches, there is also a neglect of the aspect that they were actually part of this construction. When they come into renovating, when these buildings actually, some of them maybe are leaking or there is a need to replace something, they never go to do the same procedure that they used to construct the building. They adopt new material to make it available and usable to them. So for instance, you'll find the first church here, you'll see that the interior of it is tiled. And now initially, this building here is the one that shows the original floor. Unfortunately, the zoom is there. So this is the original floor, and it's actually made out of clay and it's brick. But you find that form of floor is abandoned completely, and you can see the alley here is paved and there is nothing of this nature. And you find that the tile of this kind was the one that populated all through southern Tanzania. But bit by bit, this has been replaced, especially when the need arises. And you can find the church like Kigonsera, for instance. The old church has been changed, and the parish priest is actually boasting that he is busy erasing the history of the church here. And you can see this is the one laughing here. You can see me in the middle, but the rest of them are priests. And this one is actually a departed soul of Father Tuzinde. And you see that when need also arises, there is also painting of the exterior. So usually the bricks are left out, but in Nandete, for instance, the painting has been used. You can see the roof has completely been changed. Now this is a resistance that cannot be attributed to the lack of material. Yes, so the photo down here shows that the availability of material to roof are available. So it's not the question of lack, but it's the question of resisting to use this type of material to continue with the architecture that was there previously. I'll end up here and expecting more from you. Thank you.
Okay, Thank you, Nancy, for this insightful presentation. Now I'd like to introduce the last group of speakers of this session, who are also online. And the title of the lecture is Historic Preservation of German Colonial Heritage in Tanga, Tanzania, the work of the Tanga Heritage Center, that is abbreviated as URITI. Just a short word of the speakers. I would like to say that Joel Niganile and Mohamed Majura are both representatives of the Tanga Heritage Center, URITI, that is also in Tanzania. So I would just like to give them the floor. Yes, so in the meantime, while waiting for the last group of speakers, I think it's advisable for us to start with a question series, and then I'll just give you the floor for us to start to react to the previous presentations. But since charity begins at home, maybe I'll just like to ask the first question to Nancy about the resistance processes she's been talking about. I would like to know from her whether maybe it's like in Cameroon, where colonial architecture appears as discriminating practice and as token as colonial hierarchization between white and black populations or colonized people. Maybe we should take series of questions. I don't know. Okay.
For me, I see that the mission centers have been in contact to the people and also serving the community. So the example that I've showed indicate the entanglement between the community and the mission. And it's not like something that it has a disconnect. It is something that from the initial time when the mission were established, they have been in use. And so the contact between the local people and the mission has been there, and it is there until today. And so the resistance of not using the similar architecture, and in this case, especially when it comes to even renovating the same mission station. So if it is resistance to them establishing houses that are similar to the church, but it is perplexing when even renovating the same churches, even when materials are available and they were actually locally acquired, and the people who actually made them are still living, they adapt a new technology to that of the church. And when this is not mediated, there is a danger that at a particular point, all this will be only the exterior will remain, like the windows, things that are difficult to change. So the windows will be the only thing that, the arc windows will be the only thing that is remaining. But if the walls are painted, the floor is tiled, then subsequently this is gonna perish completely.
Okay. Next questions, please. Ruoran, do you have a word for this?
Yeah, thank you very much for these fantastic presentations. I remember when we walked through with Ruoran and Professor Xu to the Tianjin concessions some months ago. I was so fascinated by the fact of the Chinese local enthusiasm almost to kind of further develop the sites in their own kind of architectural language, which is a very fascinating concept in a sense. And I would like to ask you to speculate a bit on why this fascination on the Chinese side for the history and then rewriting it in the terms of heritage, but continuing it in style and commercialize it and even bring it into tourist commodification. This is a very interesting process. And I would like to ask you what you think about why this all is so enthusiastic and positive in a sense, which would not automatically assume for let's say, colonial heritage per se, because you would assume that there is resistance and either developing further. And this is a fascinating process.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Vorhoelzer. Thank you. It's very nice to see you again. I think as the concession is a little bit different, is a kind of special overseas enclave, is different from the colony. So the German concession in Tianjin, the German didn't have the sovereignty, but only the administrative rights. So I think for the planning and construction is a little bit different from the concession, and also to the local people, in their opinion, they think is also a kind of their like the Tianjin people's place rather than the colony. So after the People's Republic of China established in 1949, it became a kind of transformation and also the heritization. So I believe that the perception and the valuation of the concession architecture heritage is a kind of changes dynamically over time. An example is that it was a quite big earthquake in 1976 in Tianjin. So even if there was only a little damage of the building at that time in the concession, but some of the whole building has been demolished because of the conflicts between the socialism and the capitalism. So the earthquake is a kind of opportunity for them to regenerate the city. So, and after the earthquake, the further urban regeneration became, and also after Tianjin became a historical cultural city in 1986, there was a rethinking of the modern heritage, and also at the end of 20th century, there was a boom in the reconstruction. I think as the name and the plan of the German style area in the former German concession, this name has been proposed in Tianjin since more than 10 years ago, but it has not been successfully promoted until now. So we believe that there must be some argument and games among all the parties involved in this plan. So Professor Xu and Professor Aoki and me, my team at Tianjin University is also conducting the research on the modern urban history and concessions. So we hope that we can find some better way to contributing Tianjin's urban development, and hopefully it could be a much better approach than just simple to remake a German style area. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the answer.
The Shared Built Heritage Committee went to China also and discussed the concessions in different cities, like in Shanghai and in Ruoran and also in Tianjin, and but not only the German concessions, but the concessions of the French and also of German, of UK, of the English, and also Americans. But my question is, I experienced in your report that Tianjin is a World Heritage Site, and or isn't this true? And if yes, what part did it play in the World Heritage nomination?
Sorry, you mean the advantage side?
Concession side, the German concession side. I thought it would be a part of the World Heritage side, or isn't there a World Heritage side, or it's not on the list?
You mean the heritage side?
The World Heritage Site. UNESCO World Heritage Site.
No, it's not the UNESCO World Heritage Site. Just I mentioned the UNESCO World Heritage Site is in the my explanation about the Ruoran statue. That there was a Ruoran statue in Tianjin German Concession, but no one. I believe that no one in Tianjin knows that who is the statue. What Mr. Ruoran means to the European country, and there's a Ruoran statue in Bremen's town hall in Germany, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Yeah, yeah, but not in Tianjin.
Thanks to these three talks. I have a question to Narcisse. You were talking about the bullets and the remains in the site, and you were talking about hikers. And do you have a problem with illegal archaeology? Because if something becomes famous, also for small groups, they want to take things, or they want to discover something on the earth. And I know it from Germany or from Europe. This military stuff the people are very interested in, and I don't know how it is in Cameroon, and especially in Banyu and Moa.
I think that it is a form of reappropriation. This graffiti that we can find in the wall and the fortress, it is a way of reappropriation, but I think that it make, comment dire, it dénature, ou on peut dire en anglais, it negatively transform the history of these fortresses. Because we think that for a good conservation, we have to maintain the fortresses like it had been transmitted to the mountaineer groups that live with these fortresses today. A good example is done by the cemetery. Person can touch this cemetery because of his spiritual characters. Anyone can touch it. The cemetery are sacred. So it is a difference with this form of fortresses that is frequently exposed to the vandalism, and the cemetery which are still in good state of conservation.
I would like to address my question to Mrs. Ruoran. Is that pronounced correctly? Yes. In how far can your findings attribute to the discourse here in Germany, the linkage between the mission and the Maji-Maji War, which is a real gap here in Germany? There is a strong amnesia as far as colonial intervention is concerned. In how far can there be an exchange and transfer, and to overcome this imbalance of powers, institutional power also nowadays in Germany, in the sense that some discourses are addressed, but some are not. And I don't see a discourse here on the Maji-Maji War in Germany and this colonial German project in Tanzania, which had a devastating result on the local population. That's my question.
Thank you for the question. I would say that the missionaries were not innocent bystanders during the Maji-Maji event. And they were there, they witnessed the war, and in some places they actually triggered the war through the conflicts. So for instance, in Songea, the missionaries had burnt a ritual hut, and that was the immediate cause of the Maji-Maji resistance in Songea.
because that was immediately after a chief had offered to the ancestors. And then the missionaries burnt the hut as in the name of idol worshipping. So this was the immediate cause of the war. But as I said in the beginning, that the laws, the rules that were imposed into the missionaries forced that they were also in possession of guns. Administrators would rest into the mission centers. And so there was a small difference, especially from the local people, between the administrators and the missionaries. So from the day go, they had a very small differences, and you cannot say that the role of the missionaries were different from the colonial administrators. The missionaries also took part in looting of the objects. Some of the material that were taken away from Tanzania, for instance, were taken by the missionaries. So there is also the point that they were also displaced into some other African countries. So you find that the objects that were carried from Tanzania were displaced into South Africa or Congo because the missionaries were going from one station to another. So in this case, you cannot say that the missionaries were innocent during the Maji-Maji War. However, the community also remember them as where they got help from. So for instance, after hunger was inflicted to them, the missionaries provided food to the people who were living nearby the station. So when you put the missionary into this question, you have to put it in what they did and what they didn't do. But maybe the most important thing that one can say is the question of the stories. As third part, you can say, in this process, they documented what they saw, and they have preserved this into their archive. One of the things that is discriminating is the fact that the missionary archive in St. Ottilien is open to the public, whereas archives in Tanzania, for instance, are locked, are not accessible to the public in Tanzania. Now, I cannot travel from Tanzania to St. Ottilien to come and access the archive here, while the same material, original copies, are in Tanzania. So these are some of the things that we need to talk about and emphasize that the missionaries and the publics also to know that they are happening.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation. I wanted to also ask back to Nancy Ruoran, and maybe again to ask clearly on maybe your opinion on the renovations, because on the one hand, I felt like it being resistance, reappropriation, also emancipation, and on the other hand, you said it's also a forgetting of the history. And I just wanted to ask back on your opinion, and mentioning one really far side note in some way, but it reminded me to when I was in Kathmandu in Nepal, where after the earthquake, the palace was destroyed, and in the museum, which was already the reconstruction of the palace, they had a text about the discussion with UNESCO, because they said we need to build it up in the way the craftsmen right now do it, and not rebuild it this very, very same way which it was before. And it was a big discussion whether it can still get money from UNESCO when it's not the same as before. And I wanted to kind of ask back if there also the UNESCO is some kind of power structure which holds up one specific understanding of dealing with cultural heritage, which is more focused on conservation rather than appropriation and making new functionalities and new approaches to this.
Thank you. I will say that if I start with where you ended with the UNESCO, Tanzania has a very bad experience when it comes to a UNESCO heritage site. So
One of the example is that of Zanzibar, whereby the UNESCO heritage site collapsed. And this is in the middle of houses of the local communities and also the government in Zanzibar. And then you realize that when these UNESCO heritage sites are protected by the so-called World Heritage Site without the community involvement, it is a danger that they pose. But when it comes to the renovation of sites that I've been talking about, I'm also in the same situation as you, because I can differentiate quickly between the sites that the missionaries are still part of the Benedictine missionaries or the German missionaries are still on site. When it comes to renovation of these buildings, things are different. So for instance, Peramio, whereby the Benedictines still have a stronghold, you find that the floor is still the same, the wall is still the same. But in outstations, where you find that they were originally established by the Benedictine missionaries, but now they were left out to the hands of the local Tanzanian priests, that's when you see these changes and not renovating according to the original plan. In another site, that is Yakobi, these ones are not Benedictine missionaries. They claimed that they have no one to replace. They have no one to replace the Germans' architecture. They say these locks came from Germany. We cannot get this lock here. We don't have any collaboration with German missionaries to bring the lock back. And so we can only use what we have. So for them, the resistance is according to the availability of the material that were used. But with the case of the Benedictine missionaries and the availability of material that they constructed themselves, it is hard to tell where the resistance comes from. As I said, the labor was penitential. The labor was something that they remember until today. So I want to assume that the hectic nature of the construction itself is one of the things that they are resisting to implement until today.
Thank you to both of you, because I went close to your question and close to your answer with my question. Because first of all, thank you for your talk about this export of German religious problems to southern Tanzania. First of all, that's an aspect to be mentioned. You were telling us that as a consequence, there were fights happening because of this division between the missionaries. Okay, that's one story. The second story you told us, these missionary stations are not listed monuments. So UNESCO don't, it's out of it. So coming now to your arguing, this missionary church were active for a long time. Some you told us just right now, until recently, under the financing and the responsibility of the Benedictine orders. So I can tell you that even in Germany or in Europe, these kind of heritage is not easy to manage because it's the church's property. That's the second aspect. And now the third. I'd like to know whether you are defining it a reappropriation of the work your ancestors did as forced labor in this church. Can you accept this as your property, and then the change of this property with the availability of materials nowadays? Because it's clear, whether in China or in Samoa or in Togo or in other places, these materials usually came as prefabricated modular systems to your country, and there was no facility over there which could reproduce the same material on site. So nowadays, as conservatives, as we are all, more or less, it's difficult to conserve without knowing how these materials have been produced, implemented in the building, and how they can be not reconstructed, but given in a new function with new materials. And I'd like to come back to your suggestion this morning. The ladies wearing the bricks on their heads, these were mud bricks. So why not going back to the local tradition and combining the colonial heritage with a new attitude, with a new function? That's just a suggestion, an idea that came from your considerations. Thank you again.
Yes, before giving the floor, I would like to say that we still have just 1 minute. So.
Okay. Thank you so much. With the missionaries in southern Tanzania, especially in Danda and Peramiho, they actually brought the technology. So these bricks are produced until today. So the kiln, all the material, the production of the material is still ongoing. But only it is used mainly in Peramiho and in Danda, where these places are. Initially, they would have been transported to all other sites and be used. So to me, the question of procurement, the question of material, availability of material to the Benedictine missionary centers at least is not something that is difficult to acquire because of the industries that they produced, and they are still making them until today.
Okay, thank you very much, Ruoran, Narcisse, and thank you also, wonderful. And so we are very good in time, and now we have a break until we have 30 minutes break, and then the next session will be the full about youth tourism and commodification. So thank you very much for your kind attention.